about that.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Hello.
Hi.
Bonjour.
People, you know. Bonjour, Judith.
Hello, everybody.
Bonjour.
Hello, everybody.
Bonjour. Bonjour.
No. Head's in.
You on? No, I'm not.
Okay. Let me get you. Let me get you. Don't you mess around. You have
Okay.
okay. There you are. And
Okay.
no, not okay, because you want to enter full screen.
Sorry, I have just to someone else.
Just let it go.
Oh, TLC.
Hey, hi, Bunny.
Hi, Theory. How are you?
Oh,
How are you?
perfect.
Good.
As usual.
Yeah,
Theory.
it's really
Hi.
boring.
Hello? Oui, oui, bonjour. Vous n'avez pas dit qui c'est exactement? Marjorie, how are you?
Alors, ok, Thierry, je crois que j'avais dit sur mon message que c'était moi, pardonnez-moi.
Ah oui?
Je crois bien que j'avais payé, mais peut-être ça, je vais repayer de nouveau.
Alors, I don't think I got your payment actually
Ok,
for
donc
this
je vais recliquer.
this.
Je croyais que ça s'est bien passé. Je reclique. Si
Okay.
jamais vous avez deux paiements, on va s'arranger après.
I will send the link to you right away, okay?
Ok. Désolé que c'est 16 heures déjà, mais
All right, yes. No worries. I will send it right away. Okay? So sorry guys, I will just have to send the link to Marjorie.
Okay, thank you.
Again, Marjorie, what is
you want me to hang up? Or?
just tell me, Marjorie, which email is yours?
My email is Marjorie DB.
Okay, I got it.
Okay.
Gmail.com. Huh?
Je suis devant mon ordinateur.
Okay. And you can.
Certainement moi qui a peut-être. Je croyais que j'avais bien fait pour le
Alors,
paiement.
I'm just gonna check again, about this payment, of yours, but I have the reservation here online. And
Je viens de refaire, donc je crois que le
Oh, please.
a marché.
Oh yes, it's gone. It's okay. No need to book it again. C'est bon, Marjorie. Le paiement est arrivé. Il n'y a pas de problème. Ça vient juste d'arriver. Perfect. Okay. Okay, so that is sent now. Yeah, it is sent. All right.
I'm very interested in this. It's a real passion. I suis passionnée. Et je voulais pas
Please,
rester.
Marjorie. Tais-toi, Marjorie.
Tout le monde de faire attendre.
Well, hang on. Let me check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's still 2 people missing.
Okay, I didn't get your. I did not get your.
Well, Marjorie.
Voilà.
Oh, you got it? Oh, perfect then. Perfect. All right. Okay, so I hang up the phone then.
Okay, when you see it on TV, you let me in.
Sure, of course.
Oh, regretting.
Okay, here we are. All right, everyone, are you ready to start? Are we all ready to start then?
Yes. Right.
Yes.
That's good news. All right. Barry's here. Everybody's. Oh, that's Rosanna.
I don't see Valerie.
Valerie's not here yet. It's true.
No.
Valerie, here she comes.
There. Ah.
Hello?
Voila.
Hello, folks.
Hi, Roseanne. Rosanna.
Hi there.
Oh, okay. So why don't you just like open your Zoom and I would just give you the link straight away.
Terry, you're blurry.
Yeah, he is a little blurry.
He's been blurry for a while. He mentioned it about 2 weeks ago.
I can give you the ID. If you open your Zoom, I can give you the ID of the meeting.
Okay, my Zoom is open, but it's trying to open. Ça tente d'ouvrir le lien que tu viens d'envoyer.
C'est bizarre, je viens de l'envoyer pourtant. Okay. Je le renvoie également au même moment. Oui, oui, je sais, c'est ce qui s'est passé aussi pour beaucoup de monde. Je renvoie le bon lien juste maintenant. Hein. Sorry about that. No, that's okay. Okay, here I send it right now. Right again. Okay, it is sent. I hope so. All right. So I'm going to share the screen. And don't worry, Marjorie, we're going to wait for you. Sure. Okay, so
Terry,
we.
there I am.
Okay.
I was wondering if my picture is showing up on the band on the top.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I don't see my picture.
You don't see your picture?
No, do you see my picture?
Hang on. So, who's talking?
Rosanna.
Rosanna. No, I see a very nice photo of yours. I see actually two of you. There's Rosanna with like a dark back screen, and you were like just facing the sea. Is that what you wanted, or?
Oh, I don't know. It doesn't matter. I just don't see anything on my end.
Rosanna, did you open that, like did you open the two computers or two devices, because this?
Yes, I did. I'll close the other.
Because you know there's some kind of echo, and you should.
Okay, now it's just one.
Oh, okay.
But now I don't hear you.
So that's much better. That's much better.
That was
Okay.
a bad move.
I'm just.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you perfectly. Perfectly.
No. Can you hear me?
Sure. I can hear you. I can hear you all right. You know, the best is that if you can hear me. That would be the most. Okay, so let's share the screen now and try it right now. Okay, because we have a lot to say today. I'm afraid it might be a bit of a huge number of people of names today. That's because the Dreyfus affair, you know, is well, it's quite. There's a lot to say about it now. That's the main problem, and a lot of participants, a lot of people. I'm gonna just like everyone. There's lots of echo today. I don't know why.
Yes.
Okay, here it is. I mute everyone. Okay, so as I was saying, you know, there's there's many people part of this what we call the affair. Huh? So you will have to bear with me a little bit, you know, to understand it all. It's a fascinating case, really. It is essential to, in many ways, many people believe, like, to understand contemporary France, you have to understand about the Dreyfus affair. It's probably difficult for us today to realize how much, to what extent this has divided the country. This has fascinated also people back then, at the end of the 19th century mainly. But not only France, not only in France. We will see that, you know, there have been echoes about the affair in many parts of the world, and other countries will also be fascinated and will be not really actors, but will contribute in some ways, you know, to the outcome. So this is quite important. And so you have a picture here of one of the tenants of the affair, on the right. This man is Émile Zola. We will talk about him and his famous paper, J'accuse. So I accuse. That he will write in a newspaper, and that will be a real shock, a real bomb, you know, in the country. And behind the paper you can see the militaries, because that's the main problem. That's the army that's is under on the rod screen now, right there. So on the grill, it's a complicated moment. So to understand the context, France is we are in at the end of the 19th century, in 1894 exactly, and at the end of the 19th century we have this man as the president of the Republic, Félix IV. For the ones that know France already, and the Père Lachaise cemetery, he's got a very nice tomb there, and he was also well known because he died, you know, in the hands of his mistress at the Élysée Palace, and so this kind of intimate outcome, you know, of his, you know, like dying in kind of joy, was fascinating. Also the world, and there are like tons of newspapers that talked about this, the end of Félix IV, and to this day he's always been talked about, you know, for kind of a special death, special way of dying. But it's not, of course, for his death that we are interested in him. It's just to say that he's the man in charge, you know, at the end of the 19th century, and he's France has become a republic, as you know, after the Second Empire, the fall of the Second Empire, due to the war against Prussia in 1870, 1871, when France will lose Alsace and Lorraine, and kind of built itself slowly as a republic. There was some many ways France could have become monarchy again. But at the end of the century, republic is holding firm, and it's the definite regime of France. We're in a context, of course, of revenge that is behind France, behind everybody's mind. Revenge against Germany for the loss of Alsace and Lorraine. So this surge in both armies, all throughout Europe actually, to get more credits for weapons, for new weaponry, and the end of the 19th century is actually complex in terms of international relations, and to many people, it seems obvious there's going to be a war between France and Germany by the end of the century. So to let you understand that, you know, there's lots of tension, behind the whole affair. What's also behind us is that this large anti-Semitism ideas behind many French people at the end of the 19th century. You have here a picture of a book that will have a considerable success. It's by this man, Edouard Drumont. He's a journalist, and he will write this book called, La France Juive, Jewish France, the Jewish France, to have this supposed alert, on how France is being taken by the Jews. Just as a way of a reminder, France gave full citizenship to the Jews during the French Revolution, so a century before, and this was confirmed by Napoleon. So the whole 19th century saw migrations from Jews from all over the world, mainly from Eastern Europe and Central Europe. So the France was seen a bit like a lighthouse of peace compared to many other countries where anti-Semitism was open and state. It was influential and official. Anti-Semitism, wasn't born, with Vichy France or with Nazism. It's something that has accompanied many countries, especially in Europe, since day one, since the crucifixions of Christ. So this is something that has been going on for a long time. There's a surge in anti-Semitism at the end of the 19th century. This is due to these tensions I was telling you about, with Germany and other countries, because for many people, the Jews are considered as they don't belong to a kind of nationality. They are Jews before being French or Germans and all. So they will be traitors, whatever happens, and they are seen as instilling many parts of society. It's kind of amazing because at the same time, and that's where it's all ambivalent. You remember we talked about Sarah Bernhardt, who was the most adored actress, even in the whole world back then. And you had many actors in the finance, press, politics, artists that were emerging, Jews from all over. So there was this fantastic Jewish elite that was well in position at the same time at the end of the 19th century. So you will see here some points of divides that are laying behind the French society. You have also this book, for instance, was published at 100,000 copies during the first edition, and was re-edited, republished, 2 weeks after. The 100,000 it was sold, in 2 weeks. So there had been like many republishing of this book that will accompany France for a long time. And this man, Edouard Drumont, we find him again, is the main animator of La Libre Parole, which means the free speech. This is a newspaper, among others. There are many other newspapers that are officially anti-Semitic and that will attack Jews all the time. So it's also quite interesting to see how the press was free in many ways in those years, free to caricature a president that would die with his mistress in the act of love, at the same time free to attack and sometimes really widely and terribly parts of the French society, whether they're Jews or foreigners or whatever. The women that wanted the right to vote, were attacked the same way. So it's interesting. So we have in this society that is going in many different ways at the same time. And at the same time, you have other newspapers that are totally against these ones. So this is interesting because you see that the front page of this newspaper is actually dedicated to the treason of the Jew Dreyfus. So this is the paper that came out, after the affair was known. Okay, but this free speech, libre parole, was a daily newspaper that came out during the affair and until the mid 1920s. Okay, but among others, you will see other examples of incredibly anti-Semitic other newspapers. So to come back to our man, Alfred Dreyfus. So this is he's an Alsatian-born military officer. He's rich. His family is among like a family of 6 children, 4 brothers, and they have this plant, in Mulhouse, in southern Alsace, close to Switzerland. And his father will get fortune in the real estate before setting up this company dedicated to knitting and sewing cotton, and they will be quite important, with quite success. He will also marry a woman who has quite an important fortune herself. She's the daughter of precious stone importers from Metz in Lorraine. So they are. It's interesting to know that, because this is will be what the accusation against Dreyfus will always lack, is a mobile. Usually you betray for money. And obviously Dreyfus and his wife, were rich enough. They had this bourgeois life, so they didn't need any money. So that was the mobile was always missing. As for Dreyfus, his family will choose France. You know that at the end of the 1870-71 war, Germany will leave 3 years for Alsatians and Lorraines to choose whether they want to carry on in France or in Germany, and they will decide to leave. But some members of the family will leave and will stay in Mulhouse, so in German Mulhouse, and the Dreyfus, including Alfred and his brothers, will often go to Mulhouse to visit the company and to visit part of the family that stayed there. Okay, so that's one of the main problems, is that Dreyfus is Alsatian, so naturally he speaks German, and he often visits, a country, a territory that is now part of Germany. Okay, and of course, lying behind all this, he's a Jew, and for many people in the army, that's a big problem. That's a rare picture of Dreyfus as a young man. You see already with the military uniform, probably when he's around 14, 15. So he will go out of the famous École Polytechnique, so the polytechnician, so this kind of elite military school that still exists today, and so that's very influential, and that's also another problem, because this school, as an elite school, it offers people to as the high-ranking officers that usually come from the same milieu, which is traditionalist, Roman Catholic, and usually aristocratic. The army, when I'm saying the army, I'm talking the general staff, the high-ranking officers. They don't like the republic. They're mainly monarchists, and they mainly do come from the very traditionalist background. So being Alsatian, a Jew, a father that, you know, has the success from this cotton company. You know, these are backgrounds that are not very familiar, you know, for the rest of the commanding officers. So Dreyfus, you know, this will come in handy to choose Dreyfus as the culprit, as the guilty one, you know, when the occasion comes. So it all starts, you know, there. You remember that we've talked about this place, you know, as the ex Hôtel de Beauharnais, so the son-in-law of Napoleon, that added this beautiful Egyptian portico to a 17th century mansion. And this has become, after the fall of Napoleon, the German embassy, which is still is today. It's well, the main embassy has moved to a newer building. Now it's the residence of the ambassador. Okay, but back then, at the end of the 19th century, this was the German embassy, and of course, the German embassy is under surveillance. That's the main enemy of France. So you have people, you know, watching this place. And especially this man is the military attaché of Germany in France. He's a young man that has this very mundane life in Paris. He visits often cabarets, enjoys the life on the Seine banks, and is having quite a lot of fun. And this is also how the affair, the Dreyfus affair, you know, comes into a kind of very special and incredible aspects. If it wasn't true, you could say you should make a movie out of it. You know why? Because on top of being a military attaché of Germany in France, you know, when at the end of the 19th century, you can imagine the tension. Well, he has this very active, you know, nightlife. And he has a mistress. He has a wife that, you know, that stays in Germany. He has a mistress, and he has also a homosexual affair. Okay, so that's not that's kind of special, you know, at the end of the 19th century. With this position, and his lover, the man, is no one less than the military attaché of Italy. Italy, at the end of the 19th century, is part of the Triple Alliance between Austria, Germany, and Italy. So Italy for France is an enemy also. So whatever comes to Italian hands goes to German ones, and whatever comes to German hands goes to Italy. Okay, so, and the French know that, because they know perfectly all affairs that von Schwarzkoppen may have here in Paris. So they perfectly know that he has this affair with the Italian military attaché. But what they have also is that they managed to plan this cleaning lady at the German embassy. This woman, Marie Bastien, for money, she will get papers from this man, von Schwarzkoppen, the bin in his office. She gets whatever goes into the bin, and she will get that after in a church in Paris. It's a very organized manners, and she gets that to the church. And at the same time, there's a Bible, you know, that is always at the same area, with some money inside. So she never meets anyone, and that's how the military intelligence gets some paper from the German embassy. And one day, at the end of 1894, September 1894, this woman, Marie Bastien, will get a paper that is very important. Okay, that's this one. So in French, we call it the bordereau. It's a kind of note that was torn up, you know, in 6 parts, and that was found and read in at the French military intelligence. And it says roughly that there's someone at the general staff that's actually giving some information about gun, 120 millimeter guns, about the famous hydraulic brake that will be so modern, for these days, and other well, defense secrets that came directly from the general staff. At the same time, people are really wary because the French militaries are completing this gun. I don't know if you remember seeing that one at the Invalids at the Museum of War. That's a 75 millimeter gun. That's with a hydraulic brake that enables the gun to fire many points without calculating, all the time, the distance. It doesn't move, so it allows, repeated fire. So it's a clear, step forward, in military experimentation. And so all militaries, especially in artillery, are really wary of their secrets. There's a lot of rumors. There's a lot of activities, as I said, the end of the 19th century in all countries, in all European countries. So everybody's watching everyone else. And there has been other scandals with traitors before. So this comes, as a really bad moment and a really high point, because the bordereau, the note that was found in the German embassy's bin, clearly expressed that there's a mole, there's a traitor at the general staff, and someone that knows artillery. Once again, Dreyfus is a captain in the artillery. This is so bad that this affair goes straight away to the Ministry of War, to this man. He's the Minister of War, so General Mercier, and he's under a lot of strain himself because of previous scandals, because of his probably his lack of competence in many aspects. So he's under scrutiny and under a lot of strain, especially from the press that accuses him of many things. So for him, he wants this ended, as soon as possible, and he wants a culprit, by all means, on someone that could fit, his prejudices. Of course, that would be that would be the best. We'll see him again, but he clearly is the symbol of all those high-ranking military officers in France that that will go to the meanest ends to get their point of view until the end of the affair, and that will never admit, they were wrong. And that will go into sometimes asking others to forge papers to have their view prevailing. So as a Minister of War, of course, he's getting inquiries, and the secret defense, the military intelligence service will provide writings from all military officers that work at this at the general staff, all military officers in connection with artillery, and one of them will see that well, there's a writing that is supposed to be close to the bordereau, and of course that will be the writing of Dreyfus. The Mercier, the General Mercier, will then ask this man, Dupaty de Clam, to be the main prosecutor to the case against Dreyfus. And Dupaty de Clam is also one of the key character of the affair, because he will get all his strength, all his energy in proving that Dreyfus is the culprit. Dreyfus is at the general staff for a temporary moment. He's not, you know, appointed there for good, but he was there at the point. So for them, so there's a brief inquiry by this man, Dupaty de Clam, against Dreyfus, and they found that he's a Jew. They found that he's Alsatian, that he has a company there, that he visits Alsace, part of Germany today, these days, regularly. And he's also an artillery officer. So, well, that's it. He's the main culprit. So he will ask Dreyfus to come in October 1894, and he will have this kind of a trap, you know, against Dreyfus, you know, wearing a glove, a black glove, and asking Dreyfus, you know, to rewrite the same words as were appearing on the bordereau, waiting for Dreyfus to own up to his crimes, and so to signify that he was guilty by any way. And at the end of the conversation, he was harassing Dreyfus so much. At the end of the conversation, he will just tell Dreyfus that he's under arrest, without telling him why exactly, just for betrayal. And he will put a revolver, a gun, on the table, just in front of Dreyfus, waiting for Dreyfus, you know, to commit suicide. That would have arranged everyone, and the end of the story. And of course, you know, Dreyfus, who is perfectly innocent, you know, we won't go for it, and he will be sent to prison, a prison that no longer exists in Paris. On all the interrogation rooms that were used those days, you know, were around this prison, so they no longer exist today. So Dreyfus is sent to prison, and he will be convicted of betrayal. He's a newspaper just showing Dreyfus on the at the stand. He's been convicted, and the file against him is so thin that his lawyer, you know, is quite confident, and Dreyfus as well. He's innocent, that the army will understand, and that justice will prevail. This is a case, a trial that's being held, you know, with no public. There's no press. There's no one around. Even his wife doesn't know where he is or what's happening with him. There's been a visit of their flats, and Dupaty de Clam, always the same man, said that there would be a case of war if she was telling anyone that Dreyfus was arrested and for what reasons. So she has to shut up, and she has to retain all information. So the tension is really terrible. At the end of the story, the case once again is so thin, with this kind of even if there's someone famous that can just state that this is Dreyfus writing, you know, it's not very convincing to anyone, and there's nothing showing exactly, you know, what I mean, linking Dreyfus to anything. Once again, he's a rich man, so he doesn't need the money. He comes from Alsace, and Alsace, you know, has been taken to France, so by Germany. So I mean, there's not much against him. And at the end, just before the council goes for deliberation and thinking, you know, and saying, you know, whether he's guilty or not, you know, Dupaty de Clam, him again, you know, will come with what they call the secret file that will be given to the jurors. So the defense, you know, has no access to this, and was not even aware that there was a secret file given. So to give you, you know, this all starts from anti-Semitic prejudices, and this goes on, you know, with this secret file that we will know after, of course, that in the file there was only forgeries. There was only fakes that were there, but that will influence the jury, and they will sentence Dreyfus to exile for life in the gallows, as well as degradation. Remember that since 1848, the death penalty was abolished, for political crimes. So he could not have been sentenced to death. This is a very rare photography of the degradation at École Militaire. You all know where École Militaire, and this is the dome of the Invalids right there at the back, and this is the main yard of École Militaire. So what you can see is like how many people there were. There were like 4,000 soldiers, and around the main yard, which is huge. There were like, thousands of people. Also, most of them saying death to the traitor, death to the Jew. So there was this kind of terrible atmosphere and a very tense and terrible ambience, around the École Militaire. And one of the people, one of the person, that was present that day, is Theodor Herzl, and that is where he'll get, his ideas of sanctuary for the Jews in Palestine. But we will talk about that at the end. What's interesting about that photo is that in the end of the 19th century, photography is still a fragile and complex system. And you see that when you are moving a bit, well, you don't see anything. So people with horses that are standing, they're quite neat. And the other one is really quite neat, and that's also interesting to see, is Dreyfus. It's him right here. You see how he's standing firm with a lot of dignity, while the officer in front of him is breaking the sword with his knee. So the degradation was, of course, very humiliating, and was terrible. It's also difficult to understand, because usually these kind of degradations that had happened before, are usually confidential. They are not. The army is not particularly looking for publicity to see the degradation of one of his own members. So to choose that is also an act of a clear choice by General Mercier, the Minister of War, against a Jew, to give the nationalist and traditionalist press this guilty man, for them to see, and also to see how him as a Minister of War was efficient. Okay, this is another picture showing the École Militaire this time. You see how many soldiers there are. They're also on this side of the barrier, and the crowd that's behind that are just looking around, and Dreyfus is there at the center. So it's true to say that when Dreyfus was degraded, you see here the scene of the man breaking the sword. Most newspapers, this is a newspaper calling him the traitor, a degradation of Alfred Dreyfus. Most people thought Dreyfus was guilty. There was hardly anyone that would have waged for him. So it's quite. This is also interesting, including Herzl, the Austrian man that we talked about. He thought that Dreyfus was guilty, unlike many others. So there's not that many. Here's another newspaper showing also the illustrated newspaper showing the degradation and how France, is chasing away this man from the army. This one, she's holding this Judas sign, in front of him. So pretty anti-Semitic vision, but widely shared by most of the people in the country and beyond. So what happens to Dreyfus after the humiliation? Well, he's being sent to French Guiana. Here's a picture of him, in his room at Devil's Island in French Guiana. You can, if you visit one day Guyana, you'll be able to see that island, and that's the small house, the kind of shack that still exists today, with the wall that was built around. So this island was reserved, for lepers before. For political prisoners in the mid 19th century, then for people with the leper, and then it was emptied of everyone, and the island was just like used only for Dreyfus. With the other people, the house disappeared that settled there, the guardians of Dreyfus, in a very, very harsh conditions. Not immediately, but at the end of 1896, start of 1897, Dreyfus has to sleep with shackles on his. He has to sleep, on his bed, tied to his bed, with the feet. Although the sea is full of sharks, and this the flows is so huge that it's impossible to swim to the mainland, and there's no way to escape. So that it's a clear punishment, and is above all forbidden to speak to anyone, even to his guardians. So he only says yes or no, and that's it. Apart from when there's a doctor. So the conditions are very harsh. He will. It's very, very strange that he survives, actually, this ordeal. It's a clear intention from the general staff, from the army, from the government in France, to have Dreyfus die, here at Devil's Island. They want to get rid of him, and he will survive because he's part of the bourgeoisie. He's an educated man. He's allowed to read and write, so he will translate Shakespeare, for instance. He will read and comment important authors, from the French literature, like Montaigne. And he will have this active reading, and he will especially find the kind of energy to survive with writing to his wife. He writes as much as possible to his wife, asking her to do whatever she can to get back his honor. That's his main aim, is to get back his honor. Never will he attack the army or the general staff. He would just want, for him, it's a huge mistake, and he wants to get his honor back. Okay, so he asked his wife to just to understand that all his letters are read and copied, because they believe du Paty de Clam, the prosecutor, and the staff, the general staff, the army staff, believe that they have a code from Dreyfus to his wife. So they copy again, all of his letters, and same with his wife's. They don't censor, but they copy, whatever each one writes to the other. At the same time, in France, as I said, there's not that many people that will support him. His wife, of course, she's there. She will always be there, and she will activate, all support. She has interesting connections. They are rich. It's a rich family, and her, and especially the brother, Mathieu Dreyfus, who's thought that is nicknamed the Admirable Brother by the press after that, by the intellectuals. He's the man that dedicated his life to save his brother. And Mathieu Dreyfus is married to an American wife, So they managed to have some independent investigators that will just try, and look for proof, look for support elsewhere, in London, in the USA, and so they will start, this activating supports and committees for Dreyfus, but very little, is manageable, especially in the year 1895, 1896. And there's not much to be done apart from trying to convince people that Dreyfus is innocent. At the same time, this is also the main man. I don't know if you've seen the movie J'accuse by Roman Polanski that came out last year and that got the César, the French award for the French cinemas for the best movie this year. But it's interesting because actually, if you look at this movie, if you see this movie, you'll see that the movie is mostly going around one character, and that's him. That's Colonel Picard. Colonel Georges Picard is appointed there at the head of the military intelligence service. So the same one that got the bordereau from the German embassy. And he's of course, he was there during the degradation of Dreyfus, and he was there while there were like people around the. So I have a note by Marjorie. Bibok is officer and spy by Harris. Okay, not too sure. Okay, maybe you'll tell us all about that, at the end, Marjorie. Anyway, so Picard was at the degradation of Dreyfus, and he's convinced that Dreyfus is guilty. Is for him, there's no going around. There's no problem. He's convinced. He will just try to work his way around the service, and one day, by the same way, by still this woman at the German embassy, Marie Bastien, through this little system at the church. Well, he gets hold of a telegram. A telegram. Well, it was called, in the French case, after the bordereau, it was called le petit bleu. That was the names of the telegrams back then. They were in the color blue. I'm sorry I couldn't get like a real colored picture. But if you look closely, you'll see that on the front of the telegram, this is addressed to Commandant Major Esterhazy. And at the end, behind at the back of the telegram, and there's a letter from words from this military attaché, the German military attaché, von Schwarzkoppen, ask him, some information, and that decided not to send it and ripped it up and just threw it in the bin, and that's how Picard gets hold of that. So immediately he will inquire, who is this man? Who is this Esterhazy? So that's him, the major, Walzin Esterhazy. He's not an artillery officer, but during his investigations, Picard will clearly see that he's very interested in every artillery matters. So he will get hold of information that say that Esterhazy always asks questions, always investigates about artillery, and he was also at some point at the military intelligence service. So he knew how it was working, and a couple of years before, he's also part of the general staff. So he knows people, and he knows he has access to information. And above all, Esterhazy is a womanizer. He has a lot of mistresses, especially in the north of Paris cabarets, around the Moulin Rouge and all. So he's having an incredible life. He gambles a lot. And Picard asks the normal police to go after him and to get gather information. So they discover that he's having debts, he gambles, and and they even have, through the surveillance of the German embassy, the proof one day of Esterhazy leaving the German embassy. So that's quite incredible. But these photos that were managed to be taken. So for Picard, it's interesting. So he goes to his the officers in charge, as well as the new war minister, and talk about Esterhazy and ask and investigate. And that is how he will get some letters from Esterhazy, and he will compare the handwritings, and he discovers that the Petit Bleu, the telegram to Esterhazy, and that was addressed to Esterhazy, is not a fake. Is just like, just naming someone. That the letters that was written by Esterhazy himself, is the same handwriting as the bordereau that was used to accuse and condemn Dreyfus 2 years before. So he understands that there was this big mistake in justice, as well as the wrong accusation, and that the real traitor is still outside. And this is big, obviously, because the case against Dreyfus was so important that he will hesitate. He will hesitate a couple of months before going and say, what he found and how he was complicated, and I was sure that Esterhazy was the real traitor and was the man that wrote the bordereau. So let's say that, to say the least, the general staff, all the generals in charge of the French army were not very favorable to this thesis, and they were clearly against the idea of Dreyfus being an innocent. And once someone had been condemned, for them it was very, very difficult to go back on this. That's where the whole affair gets something really, really interesting, and we don't know why exactly. Is it because of anti-Semitism? Is it because of this clear harassing from the general staff that were up and against the idea to get wrong? Is it because they feared that it would be so prejudicial to the public opinion, and to own up to their own fault? We don't know. At the same time, we don't know why Picard also decided to go on with this story. We know that he's not particularly pro-Jewish. We know that he doesn't like Dreyfus. He met Dreyfus before the case, and he was not particularly friend with him. But probably, and that's also a kind of a mystery that Polanski's movie tries to unfold. Why will he go on with this? Obviously, if Picard goes on with saying that Esterhazy is the guilty one, Dreyfus is innocent, well, this is bad for his career. This is bad, for his going forward, in the army staff. So he will go up and against, his superiors that clearly tell him to give up, to stop, his investigations. And what, will trigger him to go on with this? It's also a kind of a mystery. Probably because he understood more than others that at some point, the scandal will come out. the scandal would be so huge, he will come out and he will do everything he could to protect the army. And that's also interesting. That's something that is being shared by many in those years, that everybody, including Dreyfus, they will dedicate their life to the army and to the army's honor. So that's also why this case is so interesting. So anyway, the telegram, is being like many people, in the general staff, start to believe that Picard would have forged this one, that is the fake one, and that Esterhazy, has to be left behind, and that where comes, someone in this whole case. So another character, yes, I'm afraid, that's the Colonel Henry. The Colonel Henry, he looks a bit like a gendarme today. Is an interesting character. He's part of this military intelligence service. He was there. That's him that is acquainted with this cleaning lady, and that gets all what she can find in the German embassy's bin in that church. So he's the second in charge at the military intelligence service. He was seeking for number one, and unfortunately Picard, gets chosen before him. He's coming from the rank. He's the man, coming from the lowest extraction of the military ranks. So he gets, what can be done, and he's not lucky enough to have the highest position. So there's a bit of jealousy against Picard. We know now that he was also part of the forgeries that managed to condemn Dreyfus in the first trial, the famous secret file. He will add that to it. And when Picard finds the telegram, he will start, obviously because his superior officers asked him or led him to think that he had to do it, but he will go on with forging more fakes, more notes, proving that Dreyfus is the real culprit, is the real traitor. So this will go on. This is where this case, this story goes beyond the reasonable, beyond what could be thought of before. Is that so many people will go into a forgery, into this incredible attitude, and Henri, well, will go all the way for this, leading to make his superior officers believe that they are right. Dreyfus is the culprit, and Picard is wrong. So Picard will be progressively put out of the case, sent away from his position, and even sent to first they send him to the east of France for general investigation of the army based there, then to the south of France, and eventually they will send him to Tunisia. And Tunisia, that had been recently attached to France, conquered, and where there were large parts of the country that were still rebelling against France. And so once again, the opportunity for Picard to come back from such missions was scarce, and that would convince him also to talk to France, talk to Dreyfus support groups, and convince him more and more that this machination, there's a whole machine behind Dreyfus' guilt and Dreyfus' condemnations. As for to go on with this, while Picard is fighting against everything and fighting for his life, well, he's revealing to a Dreyfus support group what's going on. And Mathieu Dreyfus, Dreyfus' brother, will publicly name Esterhazy as the real traitor, and Esterhazy will ask himself for a trial, a military trial, and he will be cleared by the military trial, of course. This is definitely not the same trial as Dreyfus had. Everybody will listen to him reasonably. And this is an interesting picture because you see how people are cheering Esterhazy. They don't even know him. They don't know that he's gambling. They don't know his ties, with the one of his mistresses from Austria. I mean, he has this quite rowdy life, but people definitely decide to choose against someone, against something that is behind them, Dreyfus, and that will be the case for weeks after weeks, months after months. People will choose one side, and the people that have chosen one side won't want to go back, on their choice. So that's interesting. So the year 1898, will be vivid in turmoils and events. That's when January 1898, where the crowd start to get interested, in this affair, because someone is accused. There's some people accusing others. There's some people saying that there've been some forgeries. So it starts being complex. But after January 10, when Esterhazy is cleared, there's the wide movement going behind Dreyfus. Not in terms of crowd. The French population is still quite convinced that Dreyfus is guilty, but amongst intellectuals, and especially leading by him, the man I've told you about, the start of this lecture, Émile Zola. Émile Zola is probably the most important French writer alive back then. So we're not talking Alexandre Dumas or Jules Verne or even Victor Hugo. They're all dead. But Zola is still alive. And he's if you don't know him, he's very often compared to Charles Dickens in his way of describing modern France of his contemporary France, and social books such as Les Rougon Macquart. It's very, very influential. So he's been an attentive witness of the evolution of French society since he started writing, so mostly during the second half of the 19th century. And he will go with another man that will have quite an interesting life. I'm sure that many of you have heard of him, Georges Clemenceau. He's no one less than the future leader of France during the First World War, the one that will guide and lead France to victory in 1917 and 1918. He was also part of the revolution in 1870 against the Second Empire, the fall of the Second Empire. He will always, he's a doctor. He will dedicate to the poor and injured, and he's also part of the left political parties. And he's at the head of a newspaper, L'Aurore, and in a famous assembly between Mathieu Dreyfus, Dreyfus' brother, Picard, the former man in charge of this intelligence service bureau of the military intelligence, that managed to understand, what was going on, Zola and other members of this Dreyfus Support Committee group. They decide to go on printing this famous letter by Émile Zola. Once again, Émile Zola is a widely well-known author back then internationally, and he will write to no one else than the President of the Republic, Felix IV, the one I showed you before. So this is, of course, this has been used many times after, j'accuse, I accuse, and he will go on explaining the situation, explaining the forgeries, explaining the false testimonies, explaining the ways that the general staff has gone on and on and on, against someone without, any kind of normal unbiased attitude. And he will name people. He is naming the president, but he's also naming the minister of war. He's also naming the whole general staff, all the people that I've mentioned before, Mercier, Dupaty de Clam, all the people that were into the condemnation of Dreyfus. They are named. Okay, so this is a bomb. To give you an idea, L'Aurore, the newspaper run by Clemenceau, usually comes out 30,000 copies a day, and this will be published at 300,000 and gone, in a few hours. So this is really bomb. And this is exactly when, after this, that the Dreyfus affair really starts. Before that, there's just like a military trial, of a supposed traitor officer. But after that, there's a real case, a state affair that involves all parts of the French society. And after that, that is where, the society is really divided between pros and cons. You will have, in French, we say the Dreyfusards, the pro-Dreyfus, and anti-Dreyfusards, so against him. So and this dividing of the French society will go widely until the end of the Second World War, because you find, partisans of one side against the other, until then. So this will have, incredible repercussions. So this will be so big that the government and the military staff, they can't just hide it. They would dream, of course, of people going silent and just like, not speaking about it, but, with this front page, of course, this can go on. So there will be a trial, and a trial against Zola. That's him that you have here. Zola is listening, and the main people, or the main people that I've named, that are participating to this case, will come at the stand. And this is a famous moment, where Henri, the one that forged, but no one really knew it, back then, would say, it doesn't show here, but he will point at Picard. That's Picard with this North African French uniform. He would say that this man is lying in front of everybody. So this will go to kind of to kind of dramatic moments, and that will lead them to have a duel with one another. This is a rare photo of the Zola's trial. You have Émile Zola right here. Clemenceau is behind, you don't see much, and that's General Mercier, the former war minister. So you don't see it on the picture, but the whole general staff, the whole high-ranking officers of the French army were always behind and were always testifying that about their them being certain, absolute, definite that Dreyfus was the guilty man. Okay, and that in any case we couldn't get some information out because it was military secret, so it was defense secret. So it was some case to influence the jury against in a very biased way. And we know now that this man Henri, the Colonel Henri, kept on, feeding the secret file with forgeries and fakes. That's where the anti-Semitic press gets really crazy, and so that's the Museum of Horrors, and so you see Dreyfus is seen as a pig, and it's shown here as a pig, just putting like some crap, on the map of France, and that's the king of porks. So you see that how amazingly insulting the press can be. This will go on against also Dreyfus himself, the traitor. Dreyfus seen as a snake. Okay, Museum of Horrors as well. Okay, and here is against Clemenceau, shown as a hyena. Okay, hyena. So you see that the nationalist press, is getting really wild. And in the streets of Paris, is an interesting picture of a newspaper showing the mob that is burning Mathieu Dreyfus, Dreyfus's brother, just outside the Moulin Rouge. That's right there. So young people are just like any. And you would have people outside of Émile Zola's home during the whole case, just like insulting and burning his books. All his books that were so famous before, they would burn his books just like the same way the Nazis were doing a couple of years after. They would do that in the streets of Paris. So this was really a tense moment in the streets of Paris. As for Zola, well, eventually he's convicted and he's condemned. He's condemned to 1 year imprisonment and a harsh fee of money to pay, and he will leave France not to get in jail. He will go to London for a while until, fortunately, the truth, came out. Okay, so to give you a bit of it, but Zola's ideas and Zola's I mean, what he had behind him, is rightly done, because what he wanted was to give some publicity to the whole case and to instill in the French people the doubt that there had been such a machinery behind the whole Dreyfus affair, and that Dreyfus was innocent after all. So that was then, and then it's kind of a going train that can't be stopped. So there's another example of a painting by an artist back then of Zola being outraged by painter Henri de Groux from 1898. It's a terrible moment. You see how the mob, is going against him, going at him. Look at the dog. It seems he can't be coming out of it. That's quite terrible. Just to give you an idea, Zola will die in 1902. So just a couple of years after, he will not see Dreyfus fully rehabilitated. His innocence clearly proven, and to this day there's still a doubt, in Zola's death. There's been some suffocation with gas, and it seems that some quite recent investigations show that there might be someone that have actually stuffed the chimney so that Zola and his wife, got the gas in the house, in their flat, and that killed them during their sleep. But to this day, there's some mystery, and it could be the results of the Dreyfus affair. Anyway, this is also a newspaper of the famous duel between Picard and Henri that took place in March, so after the trial between the two, one accusing the other, one Picard that was pro-Dreyfus, that managed to get hold of the Petit Bleu, the telegram showing the same writing as Esterhazy in the bordereau after his investigations, and the other one, Henri, that was at this moment, at the top of his career. He had been appointed at the top of the military intelligence service, and even if he was forging proofs against Dreyfus, and people didn't know about it, and he will fight, for his honor after they'd been challenging each other at court during Zola's trial. The result of this is that Picard despite being well trained, that Henri will manage to injure Henri at the hand he was using for his with the sword. So that would be the end of the fight, and Picard would come out as the winner. A few weeks after, you have in the mid 1898. That's another moment, you know. In the Third Republic in France, you had many different offices, many different governments. The governments were based on the parliament, and the parliament was changing a majority according to a different law. So people who could league, you know, against the government or for a government. So it was governments could go up to 2 or 3 months, or sometimes 2 or 3 years, but not beyond that. So there were often changes, but in fact, there were often the same people back in charge. You could find the same ministers of war, you know, in a row. But this time, in the mid 1898, you have a new war minister, and he asks, you know, to go over the whole file and to look at the famous secret file, to look at the famous proof, and he will go to Parliament to show, hey, look at me, you know, I've seen, you know, I've got the files, you know, in my hand, and I can show you that Dreyfus is the real guilty one. He's the real man. So. And he will ask, you know, his subordinate to look closely at those proofs, and easily, very easily, they will see that these are fakes. This is actually the case for the paper I show you now, to be known as the fake Henry. So the main document forged by Henri, and has actually been taken by different letters that were cut off and put together, and the central part, you know, written by Henri himself, naming Dreyfus, as you can see here, so it was easy when you were looking at it, you know, closely, that this was a fake. So Henri was being immediately told to come to the minister, and in front of the minister, he will own up. And that's a clear switch in the case, in the whole affair, is when Henri, the man responsible for forging many of those documents, will own up, will admit that he's the one behind it, that he will forge. So he will be immediately taken to prison, to Mont Valérien prison in the west of Paris. And interestingly enough, he's sent to prison in August 30, and August 31, he's found dead. So his suicide with the knife in his hand when he was supposed to be standing, and that he still had the knife in his hand. And how could he have a knife in jail? Still today, puzzles many people that look at this story. So as people say sometimes, he's probably been suicide or helped, or being given, you know, the knife so that so he was helped rather than, you know, did it on his own. But anyway, the suicide of Henri is also a clear switch for the public opinion, and that, of course, triggers for a second trial of Dreyfus. So that there will be a clear change. So Dreyfus is sent back from Guyana, and there's a second trial that opens in Rennes, in the city of Rennes in Brittany, in August 1899. And you have here a picture of Dreyfus here on the right, with his defenders, his lawyers behind him, and the military staff and the jury just facing him, journalists. So this is crazy. You can't imagine. You know, I've been to Rennes, to this place, because you can still see it today. It's a high school that today has been named the Émile Zola High School, to remember the Zola's role in the whole story. And I was facing the military prison back then. So it was easy to hold Dreyfus. It was a small town in the 1890s, not as big as today. So it was quiet. So that was why Rennes was chosen to hold the second affair. You had about 4,000 members of soldiers, 4,000 members, soldiers that came, to guard the whole accesses, and you had 450 journalists from the whole world. You had people from Brazil, from the United States, from Japan, from all European countries, from Germany and Italy, of course. They were named during this case. And from France, of course. You had many women. By the start of June, there was not one single room in a hotel free. The whole thing attracted so many people. By 1899, the case was international. The affair got really international and got really vibrant. This is an interesting picture also to see Dreyfus leaving the trial, going back to his prison just on the other side of the street. And you see how the militaries just like are going, looking at the other side because he's been degraded. He's been like taken out of the army, so they can't look at him. So they're showing their back to him. So every day he was coming and leaving with the back of the soldiers, all looking outside. It's not because of they want to defend him against whatever attack. It's just like a sign of disrespect to a man that had been degraded. Okay, so you see here the crowds, waiting to enter the trial in Rennes. So the Rennes trial, will give like a very strange outcome. Dreyfus is being declared guilty. After all, it seems a bit incredible to believe, but he's been declared guilty and sentenced, but with like how do you say that, like happy circumstances, with the leniency to ask to the court, and 5 jurors against 2 that say that he's guilty. If he had been 3, just 3, that was the minimum required for him being declared not guilty. But there were only 2. But anyway, with this leniency ask, he's only condemned, let's say, to 10 years imprisonment. So everybody is outraged. Everybody is just getting, even the highest authorities. What does it mean? Either he's guilty and he's sentenced back, to his island, for life, or he's not guilty and he's being freed. There's no in between. But he's being sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. So he goes to prison. We are in September 1899, and then that is when this man comes into the light. Is the president of France from the start of 1899, Émile Loubet. I'm sure not many people have heard of him, but you know of him because he was the first one to go into the metro. He was the first one to go to this famous pavement that was going as a conveyor belt, all along the Seine River for the 1900 Paris World Fair. He for which the Petit Palais and the Grand Palais were inaugurated. So the 1900 Paris World Fair was essential to France. Once again, it was the occasion to show all advances in terms of industrial and economical participation of France against other powers. So it attracted like crowds of millions of people. It was also interesting economically. And many countries actually threatened to boycott France for this. reason for the Dreyfus trial. The Queen Victoria of England, you know, said she would, her and her country would not come to France for the exhibition. Italy, the same. Most of the people in Italy were pro-Dreyfus. The United States, the people were outraged, you know, with the outcome. So this internationally came like really big proportions. So Loubet, the president, came up, you know, and said, okay, we're gonna free Dreyfus. So just a couple of days after his being sent guilty for his second trial, Loubet comes in and just like, you know, get him free. And that will be a very terrible moment for Dreyfus, because Dreyfus is at the end. The being declared guilty another time for him is even more terrible than the first time. So he has no force left. He's clearly at the end, and he will be convinced to go on, because of course being freed by the president doesn't mean that he's innocent. He doesn't get back into the army. He doesn't get, you know, acknowledged as innocent to the people. So he just gets liberty. He just gets freedom. But he will choose that. He will get, you know, liberty to see his children, to see his wife, to see his family. But most of his supporters, including Zola, including Clemenceau, including one of his own lawyers, people that have followed him for years, will just like, you know, call for treason. And many of them will not speak to Dreyfus again. There will be this gap between the pro-Dreyfus after he accepts to get freed by Loubet. So here he comes again in freedom. That's Dreyfus with his two children. On the left, his daughter Jeanne. On the right, his son Pierre. He's seen here when he's probably at the end of 1899, start of 1900. It's interesting because he's a man that's probably not even 40 on this picture. And as you see, he looks clearly over 55. He's been, of course, you know, aged prematurely due to his conditions of detention in Guyana. That's an interesting picture showing the situation in France at the end of the 19th century, and I will go on, you know, for years again to show you the divide that you know came into the French society. There's a family dinner here. That's what it says: un dîner en famille, family dinner, and the man, you know, the man in charge and the father of the family say, above all, let's not speak about the Dreyfus affair. And then it says they talked about it. They talked about the case. You see how, and it was a very amusing picture showing even the poor dog gets a fork. So it's just to show you, you know, how terrible condition. You had real gaps that came into French society between families, between friends. Some of them got friends for life because of Dreyfus, and some of them, of course, got enemies for life. All friends or even families, and got divorced and all because of this affair. As for Dreyfus, finally, after a long run, there's this rehabilitation trial that goes on, and he's being taken back into the army with the rank of major. So when he's taken back in 1906, there's another picture here when he's awarded the Legion of Honor at the same time. That's him here on the right, and so you could say that everything goes back to normal. That's a picture of him and his wife, Lucy, taken that day after the Legion of Honor. You see, well, maybe it's not the best picture for Lucy, who was quite a beautiful woman. As for some people and part of the story, famous Colonel Picard, thanks to the rehabilitation of Dreyfus, many people could manage to come back. There's an amnesty in 1900 for everyone. Everyone. That's interesting also. Amnesty for everyone. So that means that Zola can come back from England, but at the same time, people that were in the general staff or commanding officers, could get out of it, without any problems. As for Picard, he's being reinstated in the army, and he gets to go to the position of general, and he would be even the Minister of War between 1906 and 1910. So interestingly, just like the picture, just like the movie, Polanski's movie is showing J'accuse about the Dreyfus affair. Once again, the movie is mostly centered around this man, Picard, rather than Dreyfus. There's an interesting scene at the end of the movie showing how Dreyfus will come to meet the Minister of War, the man that saved him in some ways, Picard, and will ask him why he's been reinstated with the grade of major, whereas he should have been like a colonel, by the end of, and his 5 years of detentions were not taken into account, when he was reinstated into the army. And Picard will say, well, there's difficult circumstances politically, and there would have to be a law for this and this and that, and clearly says to Dreyfus, no, I will not help you. You will remain a major. So he will not do anything to help, Dreyfus. You could think that these guys, could have become friends or something, but no, Picard is part of this, of the same party I was telling you at the start of this lecture, this old-fashioned French conservative background that were at the height of the French army, and is definitely not one of Dreyfus's friends. Well, I mean, so as to help him anyway. There will be it's interesting to see him like wearing this uniform, because Picard will go. He was horse riding quite often, and once in Amiens, in northern France, he will get out of his horse, and his horse will be a bit too rowdy, and get Picard off the horse, and he will die out of this. He will die in 1914, just a couple of months before the start of the First World War. Just to say, for his funeral, that were national back then, Dreyfus and his brother will attend the funeral, so no hard feelings. As for Dreyfus, he will be part of the First World War. He will get his rank as a colonel for the First World War, and he will be active, even though he was over 60 years old. He will be an acting member of the war during the years of 1917 and 1918. He will fight at Verdun and the Chemin des Dames also, and he will die in 1935. And this is a picture taken just a couple of months before his death. So he will live his bourgeois life, until his death. I've recently actually came across, the place where he died, which is in the 17th district, close to Terne metro station. He's and the plaque is actually wrong, because he was named a colonel, at the end of the First World War. Should have been the Colonel Dreyfus lived there from 1928. Okay. Once again, the international consequences of the Dreyfus affair. Theodor Herzl, we talked about him. In 1897, he will have the first Zionist meeting in Basel, in Bâle, in Switzerland, and he will be there at the degradation at the end of 1894, and he will. That's supposedly where he will get his he will be convinced that for the Jewish people there would be no other alternative than to get a country of their own, leading to the creation of Israel. this is a bit challenged today because it's true that Herzl also said in letters in 1894, 95, 96 that for him Dreyfus was guilty. So this is interesting also because in all the support committees that were put together by Dreyfus's brother Mathieu or his wife Lucie, there was no members of the great Jewish elite in France or the great rabbi of France. They were not part of it. All the Jewish aristocracy in those years in France were either convinced that Dreyfus was guilty, or they thought that they would not be associated with that because for them they thought that they wanted to appear as part of the French society as normal citizens and not as Jews first. Okay, so they would mostly get some support from intellectuals. That's the birth of intellectuals. This affair, this Dreyfus affair. Intellectual getting sides, intellectual getting engaged into the Dreyfus affair. You will have the pro-Dreyfus, the against anti-Dreyfus intellectuals. That would some of them will sign actually for a monument to the Colonel Henri, the one that forged so many documents to prove that Dreyfus was guilty. There was this wild subscription for a monument to his memory. It seems incredible today, but quite famous people were part into this subscription to show you the extent of the divide in France against pros and against. Now, what do we have here? Well, it's the famous statue of as a tribute to Captain Dreyfus. It's by an artist called Louis Timberley, and he's nicknamed Tim. And this statue was changed many times. It was supposed to go at École Militaire, where it was degraded, but it was complicated there. It was supposed to go behind the Justice Palace. It was supposed to go in many ways. And finally, it'd been set up in near Boulevard Raspail, so very close to the military intelligence service was located, at the end of the 19th century. And that's a copy of it, was made, to be housed in the Jewish Art and History Museum in the Marais. Okay, that's the photo that we have now. There's another copy in Tel Aviv in Israel, by the same artist, the same statue, and there's another one, that was inaugurated for in 2016. So kind of the memory of all this also by an artist called Sylvie Kochlin in Mulhouse, for in Dreyfus' hometown. This is very close to the house where he was born, that still exists actually in Mulhouse. Okay, so now what can we remember about all this? Well, the role of intellectuals, as I said, the role of the press. The press as the fourth power, as we say in France. I don't know if you say that also in the US, but the role, the fourth power, that's able, thanks to J'accuse by Zola, to come into the case and to be part of the whole affair. Sorry, the engagement of intellectuals at the same time, well, this divide, as I said, in France, things will never be the same. In France, after that was seen once again as a lighthouse for the Jews until then. Even though with the book of Drummond and so many press, so many papers against the Jews, there was some anti-Semitism that was clearly out in France, but he was still a little bit hidden. After the Dreyfus affair, this will be left open, and this will lead to the outcome of this anti-Semitism will clearly be with the appointing of Pétain as the leader of France in Vichy in 1940, and with the excesses and the tragedy that we know with the deporting of 75,000 people to the death camps from France during the occupation of France. And it's true that the anti-Semitism, after this has come down. We all know that there are always surges in anti-Semitism in many countries, and especially here. And we have still today a few thousand people that every year choose to go to Israel for their Aliyah, to Israel, to leave France to Israel. We have a few other that come back to France, but still, there's still more that leaving, and there's been a resurgence in anti-Semitic acts in France in the past 15 years, even though we know that it's largely due to the Israeli-Palestinian context, and mainly due to Muslims against Jews in France. That's the consequence of the problems in the Middle East. But it would be fair to say that there's still an extreme right-wing movement that shares the same anti-Semitic feelings that was pregnant at the end of the 19th century to this day. Probably to a smaller extent, of course, but that's still valid today. All right. I will now finish and just give you two more informations before I give the speech to you. Maybe you know that in France, if you are staying in France right now, you know about the man in charge of the health service appointed by the French government. Is a man called Jérôme Salomon. He's the one that has is second after the Minister of Health, and he's the one that gives all the directives and the conditions of the confinement in France, and all the accounts of death and so on. And Jérôme Salomon is the great grandson of Alfred Dreyfus. Another thing that's interesting, because we have a lot of interesting moments in this story. At the end of during the Second World War, you remember that the Dreyfus had a son and a daughter, and the daughter Jeanne had children, and one of them was part of the resistance, and she was arrested and was taken to Auschwitz, where she died. She didn't come back, so the Dreyfus' granddaughter died in Auschwitz, and she was the favorite of her grandparents. It seems that this tragedy led to the grandmother's death. Lucy Dreyfus, Dreyfus's wife, died of sorrow when she learned about her granddaughter's death. What's interesting to know is that, during the occupation of France, there was a Jewish Affairs Bureau in Paris. And at the end of the war, in 1944, when Madeleine Dreyfus, or Lévy as she was called, was deported to Auschwitz, the man in charge of the Jewish Affairs Bureau was called Charles Dupaty de Clam. He was the son of Dreyfus's prosecutor during the Dreyfus affair. Incredible, isn't it? It would be, well, it's to say the least, Dupaty de Clam was cleared, after the war, because it seems that, he did a lot to hinder persecutions against Jews, and he was in 1944, so it was probably more obvious for him, which victories, which side, was the victory leaning to. So he took definitely, and he was cleared, after the war, but he'd been taken into custody for a bit long and died shortly after that. So, disease. So, but still, the anecdote, the circumstance is quite interesting. Okay, well, here we are. I hope that you got it more understood about the whole story. Huh? I'm sorry, I spoke so long and there were so many names in all this. I hope it was interesting. If you have any comments, please fire away.
Yeah,
Yes.
there was, he was degraded, but yet in his second trial at Rennes, he's shown in military, a military outfit.
It's true. It's true. He's shown with military outfits, but he's just shown as a military man. He can't just like come without a belt or without anything. But he doesn't have a sword, or he doesn't have the kind of officer's attribution. He just has a uniform. He comes as a simple soldier.
Okay. All right, thank you.
A question. Could you have some words about the role of the leadership of the local church together with the quote-unquote conservative or reactionary circles in taking position during and after the trial as well?
Well, it's true that the France is experimenting different moments. The first part of the case at the end of the 1890s, the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic authorities are at the top of this anti-Semitic feeling, and they're definitely siding with the people against Dreyfus. To many people, it seems that the rehabilitation of Dreyfus in 1906 could only be possible with the change in governments. And if you know a bit of France, you know that in 1905, there's the change between the famous law, that will separate the state and the church in 1905. And this is no surprise that the rehabilitation trial comes after that. Okay, so that's a clear, there's some opposition, from the church, which is not obvious, which is not, I mean, you don't have like bishops or the Archbishop of Paris or the main institution of the Catholic Church, going loud and against Dreyfus, but you have definitely some local priests in villages, or small towns that are taking side against Dreyfus, definitely. You also have the main Catholic newspaper, the one that still exists today, La Croix, Le Pèlerin, that are talking about the worst traitors, about the Jewish traitors in the 1890s. So the Catholic press is definitely anti-Dreyfus.
Thank you.
I have a question. Am I on?
Please.
Hello? Okay. I wanted to know if there are still emotions today in France over the Dreyfus affair.
I'm not really aware of that. Let's say that the emotion that we've had, was rather against the movie director, Roman Polanski. Are you all aware with the Roman Polanski? You've all heard about him, I suppose.
Yes.
You probably know that since the Me Too stories. There have been more people against, I mean, there have been coming out against famous people that were part of some kind of sexual scandals. There's the famous scandal involving Polanski in the mid-1970s in New York, leading him to leave the United States and never being allowed back. So the story has been like after him. It seems that there are other people that are complaining about him, also from the end of the 70s, start of the 80s, in France this time. Following the Me Too, I don't know if you've seen or if you know about this, but I told you that the J'accuse, the movie by Polanski, got the highest award by the French cinema, leading to many women to leave the room of that this award ceremony. There was this big scandal of and all the staff of the movie wasn't there. So it's interesting that he was. Is it linked to the man itself? Is it linked to the story of Dreyfus? It's very complicated to say because there was a big mess outside. Of course, there was a big riot outside the room, outside Salle Pleyel that night. And the days after, there was this big, because it came out, following other stories involving Harvey Weinstein, this man Epstein that committed suicide in prison, and another Frenchman, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, that was supposed to be the French candidate for the presidential election in 2012. All of them Jews. So there was this theory of this kind of anti-Semitic league against these people, and not against what they really did or they were supposed to do. So it involved different layers at the same time, and it's a bit complicated. Let's say that to many outsiders, it's interesting to see that this could happen after everything that happened in the 19th century and in the 20th century. It could have happened again, after during J'accuse, after during the story of this. So apart from that, well, I myself, came across someone that, was convinced in the past month, that was convinced that Dreyfus was guilty. I could never think that possible today, and he was a young person.
Really?
So, yes, I know. It was very surprising, and you actually are so baffled in this case that it just stops you from speaking, because what can you speak? If someone tells you that Dreyfus is guilty. There's been many theories about this, because this story is still not totally ended. No one of you asked, what happened with Esterhazy? He's the traitor. What did he do? He left to England just after Henri committed suicide, or so-called suicide. He left to England with Queen Victoria, that was so pro-Dreyfus. He was under a false identity in a city close to London, and he stayed there until his death in 1923. So 25 years of pretty cool life. I told you also that the military intelligence service could manage to get a picture of him leaving the German embassy. Which spy, a commanding officer in France, could go to the German embassy? He was part of the military intelligence service himself. He knew that there was connection. He knew that everything was under surveillance. So there's a lot of a dark, part in this story. And it seems that definitely there's something that was sure. Is the first thing that's sure is that Dreyfus was totally innocent. That is no problem with this. He was innocent. But the second thing also that was very sure is that there was considerable support by the general staff behind Esterhazy that, could lead him to go into trial and to go into hiding. He continued writing for extreme nationalist newspapers until his death. He continued, being active until his death. How the trader could have, kept on a quite active life, even in England, for 25 years. This is difficult to understand, very difficult, but definitely more understandable if you understand that he had considerable support. But why? Why did he have so much support? So there's many theories, behind that.
Yeah, that's your next book.
Yeah, well, if you look on the internet, about the books and the documentation about the Dreyfus affair, I would take probably more than this lecture's time to cite them all. The numbers of books written about the Dreyfus affair is huge, amazing. So it's complicated. But I'm not sure that adding a new one, and there's so many theories, and some documents disappeared in 1940. There were so many fakes and false and forgeries that what is right, what is wrong, what is true, what is wrong, it's very complicated. Now it's been quite a while, and probably for many people it was important. Just a bit like the purge in 1944-45, to close wounds and to stop, looking too deep into France's divides. At some points, it's not so good for society. We'll have to live with that. I'm sorry.
I was just going to, Jerry, I was just going to tell everyone that the book, you mentioned the movie. I haven't seen it yet. I'd like to see it. But the book on which the movie was based is wonderful. It's called
Officer and the Spy.
Spy by Robert Harris, an English author. But he does say that it's not a it's dramatizing it's not you can't take it as a history book, but it's marvelous book. I mean, it's a wonderful author, and I highly recommend it to everybody. You will not be able to put it down.
No, well, it's Richard Harris.
Highly, but I will like to see the movie, but I can tell you the book was wonderful.
Well, Harris is certainly like a well-known author, and
well, he's done other books too, but this one got him this name, and then he got the movie rights with the movie and everything. So, but he's wonderful. Yeah.
I'm gonna leave you all. Thanks, Terry.
I hope it was clear enough.
It was
Thank
wonderful.
you very much.
Thank you very much, y'all. Thank you very much. Okay, well, I'll see you soon, hopefully.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah.
Have a nice weekend, everyone. Stay safe.
Bye. Stay safe. Yeah. Stay well. Sorry to make everyone get late to this today. Sorry.
No worries, Marjorie.
I will try to make it better next time. Okay. Bye. Thank you for getting
Pat.
me in. Okay. Bye.
Bye, Marjorie. Bye, Pat.
Bye, bye, Terry. Thank you.
You had never had the video on.
I don't know. It's just distracting. I only have you talking while you're lecturing. I block out all the other people.
Oh wow. Okay. I feel immensely privileged.
Yeah, I do that too. I do that too. Thank you so much.
Okay.
It was really,
right.
it was really great. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, good weekend. Bon weekend.
Merci. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Au revoir.